All right. This is going to be fun.
Let's see.
You really might hate me after this. You won't want to talk to me.
Wow. Please don't say some like weird stuff.
I'm not going to say anything weird. I'm just really going to go in. Okay, so what's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for watching my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. And I'm here with my beautiful wife, my co-host, my friend from Turkey. Yeah. What's up?
Hey, what's up? I'm AKDI.
And this is episode 7 of Simon and AKDI movie reviews on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. This was a request from somebody in my comment section on my YouTube channel. And I'm very glad that people are sending requests, that they're liking our content, that they're interested in these movie reviews. We want to cover every genre. We don't only want to do dramas. We want to do comedies. We want to do documentaries, everything like that. So send your suggestions and we most likely will watch it if it's good. So that's what I have to say.
Yeah, and also like any people that is watching from abroad, from different countries, also send us like your favorite movies from your own country, because we do also like check out some international movies and we really like it.
Absolutely. I think we've had a good mix so far. A lot of American movies and like some stand up and stuff like that. But we're going
Mhm.
international because we watch everything. It doesn't matter what country it's from. But let's get into it. So this request is The Handmaiden. I had not heard of this movie before the request came in. Did you hear about it?
I just saw it on people's list in Letterbox because it is like a high scored movie.
Hmm.
So yeah, but I didn't know like what it was about or anything like that. So
Right.
I did also like went in blind.
Right, right. I've seen a few Korean movies in the past. Of course, I think everybody's seen Parasite. I watched like one or two Korean horror movies like a few years ago. I was never really big on their cinema. Oh, of course, I've seen Squid Game too. But yeah,
Did you see Old Boy?
I believe I tried to watch Old Boy, but I never finished it.
It's the same director as The Handmaiden.
Okay, all right. So, and I think this guy is regarded as one of the best directors from Korea, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
What's his
I
name?
mean, Park Chan Wook.
Okay, Park Chan Wook. Okay, all right.
But yeah, like I just saw like a lot of people complaining about like American awards shows and why they didn't give like him the best foreign language movie and stuff like that
What for
for a
this
couple of
one?
his movies. This one and also Old Boy.
Okay. All right. So I don't know much about that. I don't keep up with the awards in that way, but
Yeah.
definitely I've heard that Old Boy is considered one of the best movies of all time. Many people have that on their list. After hearing about this movie and doing a bit of research, people really love this movie as well. And generally, Korean cinema is widely regarded as top-notch, avant-garde, classical, just great films and great TV series have come out of Korea in the past few years. So shout out to them. Whatever's in the water, I don't know what's happening. Is capitalism driving people to that extreme where they got to make great art to make up for like the grinding work hours? What's happening?
I guess. I
I got a
mean,
lot of love for Koreans. I work for a Korean English teaching company, and yeah, they're cool people. So,
yeah.
The Handmaiden. All right, this movie takes place in Korea during the Japanese occupation. So Japan occupied Korea for about, I would say, 40 years, like from the beginning of the 20th century up until the end of World War II. And
Mhm.
it's a very interesting time because their domination over the Korean Peninsula was a time when they were pressing their culture onto people. So, like, the Japanese were saying, we are the superior ones, our language is better, our culture is better, and everything like that. And
Mhm.
Korea and Japan still to this day have a very tense relationship because of some of the atrocities that happened during that occupation. And so I thought this movie was interesting just for the fact that they were picking this particular time because this is an interesting time to tell a story about so many big themes and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And generally, I would say I enjoyed the film when I watched it. I was entertained. There were parts where I laughed. There was a lot more meditative stuff going on in my mind as I'm watching it because so many of the themes are big and you're wondering what's about to happen next. You don't know who to trust in the story. What did you think of it in general, like the entertainment of the actual movie?
I mean, I enjoyed it as well. There were like, a couple of big twists. I would say we did. I think like we watched like 15 minutes of the movie, I guess, and then I don't know what happened, but we did look at the description in the website, and I don't know, maybe that kind of spoiled it for us for the first twist where we find out like the main character is plotting. But then after that, we didn't know what was going to happen. So I did enjoy it. Like in general, it is a long movie, and I don't know. At times, I did feel the time like passing a bit slowly, but overall, I would say like I enjoyed it.
Right. This is definitely a slow burn movie. The movie is about 2 hours and 40 minutes if you watch the extended edition, but I believe there's also an edition of it that's a shorter version of it. How can I say this? Most people watch a movie and know at least the summary. They know at least what they're about to watch. So a lot of the times when we watch movies, we don't like to even read the summary and stuff like that. But
Hmm.
because this is a very foreign film for us, we wanted to read the summary just to get an idea of what was happening.
Yeah,
But even if you read the summary, that one twist that comes in the movie isn't that big of a deal because there's
yeah,
many more after that.
yeah. There's like two more after that.
Right. All right. So the movie opens up with rain falling down in some small Korean village. Soldiers are marching through the town. They're obviously like Japanese soldiers because they're wearing like patches with a rising sun on them. And the women are crying because one of the girls has to go. One of the girls is being sent to some house of some rich colonial to work as a handmaid for the maiden at the house. And it's very sad at the beginning. She gets driven off in this car, and then she pulls up at this mega mansion. And I like that the movie just automatically like jumps into the action. There's not like a lot of backstory. So like
Hmm.
you know that this poor girl is getting thrown into this large house. The house is built in a European style, but there's also a Japanese section. The girl, as she's walking through the house, is being led by an older woman who's one of the maids here, and she's
Hmm.
explaining everything to her, what to do, what not to do, and stuff like that. It gives you very Oliver Twist vibes, very, I don't know, Harry Potter first making it to Hogwarts vibes. What did you think
Yeah.
about that opening scene?
I mean, my first thought of like, I guess about one of the themes was that when the maid was like taken through the house, and then at the end, the like head mistress, I guess, the head maid, he said like, okay, this is where you will sleep, and then he opens up like this closet with a like raggedy bed, and yeah, like, and the first thought I had there was like, okay, so in all of this like glory and all the space and stuff like that, like this is what she gets. I was like, maybe at least like just a normal room. Like it's only like a closet with a bed inside. Like there's no room and stuff like that. And
Right.
also like she was saying, you will eat the scraps of the mist and things like that. And like in my head, I'm thinking like, okay, like these people look like they can feed employers,
Mhm.
so why don't they? So I was just thinking about that basically during that introduction.
Yeah, I mean, they were trying to, keep her essentially like a slave, like as a pauper, as somebody who's always going to be begging and stuff like that. But she has to act subservient. The girl's name is Suk-hee, and they changed her name to a Japanese name because in the house you cannot speak Korean, even though everyone in the house is Korean except the mistress, the main character. Her name is Hideko. She's actually from Japan, but everybody is forced to act Japanese, speak Japanese, and act in Japanese manners. And
Mhm.
that was very interesting for me because I really like those stories that delve into like assimilation and cultural hegemony and making people other than what they are, because it's very
Mhm.
similar to like what we went through as Black Americans, and to see people go through colonization like that was cool. And yeah, they keep her in the closet, and it looks very uncomfortable. I mean, Asian beds generally look uncomfortable. They're not very thick mattresses. I couldn't sleep on that. There's only one pillow. It's like a rolled up t-shirt. Who can sleep on that? Who can sleep on a rolled up t-shirt? Only.
Well, it's better for your health.
Is it really?
Yeah, like sleeping on not so soft mattresses. I think it's better for your back.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I feel like I would wake up with all sorts of back cracks, back attacks. Anyway, so the girl Suki is sleeping that night, but then she hears a scream from the headmistress, and this is how she's introduced to her. She runs into the room, and they meet, and she says that she's scared because she has dreams of her aunt who hung herself from a tree outside of her window, and this is the first time these two women meet. The next day, Suki is introduced to Hideko properly, and she introduces herself as her new handmaiden and stuff like that, and yeah, she then discovers Hideko discovers that Suki can't read. She brings her letters and stuff like that, but she's very illiterate. So she says, like she's acting to be illiterate. What did you think of that when they first like got to know each other and met? Like, what did you think their relationship was going to be in the movie?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of thought I liked Hideko because she seemed like someone who doesn't really care about all the rich things that she has. She does like, it's like sort of, she was raised to that standard,
Hmm.
like I don't know, wearing gloves and I don't know, like just looking good all the time and stuff like that. So she does those things because I think those things are what she's used to. But it just felt like in her head she wasn't like stuck up with like this sort of bourgeoisie thing.
Right.
And like I think she spoke like Korean to Suki, and then Suki says like, "Why are you speaking Korean?" And then Hideko says like, "Oh, Uncle makes me read in Japanese all day, so I'm so tired of it."
Hmm.
So like we have this like Japanese like lady who
Hmm.
is actually like speaking in I guess what was considered then like a bad language.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Right. Now, I think it's good to talk about Hideko, like who she is as a character. So she's an actual aristocrat. Like she was born in Japan. She's actually really descended from those, very rich people, right?
Hmm.
And she's brought to Korea to live with this guy, her uncle, Uncle Kazuki, because Uncle Kazuki helped the Japanese steal some of the Koreans' land. And in exchange, he got a gold mine and he got very rich. And so I believe Uncle Kazuki married like her father, like, no, married her mother or something like that. But then her mother dies or something, right?
Yeah, I guess her mother
So
dies when she gave birth to Hideko.
okay, so Hideko's mother is dead, but she's actually really from the royalty and that sort of stuff. And so
Hmm.
she's not trying to fake to be really rich and stuff like that. But she
Yeah,
grows up mostly in Korea because she lives there as a young girl under the pressure of this Korean man who wants desperately to be Japanese and worships Japanese-ness and stuff like that.
yeah,
And so she's in a very interesting situation as a young girl and comes up in this house.
yeah.
Um, Unique character. We also come to find out that Hideko every day goes to read in the library of Uncle Kazuki. And Uncle Kazuki is a very wealthy man because of his gold mine, but now he's made so much wealth that all he does is read all day. And people think he reads, scientific books, history books, biological books, but he's actually reading something else. And he makes Hideko come to his library every day and read to him. And he has a vast library. One day, Suki tries to come into the library, but there's a snake right there, or what we think is a snake, blocking the person from entering. And Suki is prevented from entering the library when she tries to come to Hideko. What did you think of that
Yeah.
scene?
I think like that scene was very like strong because it's almost like we in general like people see this elite part of the world as the most literate, the most educated, the most well-read people, right?
Hmm.
And it's almost like the people, regular people, middle class people or lower class people are almost like forbidden to read such things, and they're thought as like, oh, they wouldn't understand it or they don't know how to read and stuff like that, while we know like Suki was trying to learn how to read and stuff.
Hmm.
So, and Hideko didn't mind it. Hideko said like anyone can learn how to read, just never lie to me.
Hmm.
That's what she cared about. She didn't really care about like Suki being illiterate.
Hmm.
And it was like that sort of symbolism where like that library, we thought probably when they were talking about how Uncle reads and has this huge library and loves books.
Hmm.
Personally, I was thinking, okay, so he reads like the classics or something, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? I didn't really think what actually he was reading, and that's like such a big symbol in how we view like the educated elite, I
Right,
guess.
right, exactly. Yeah, when we see the educated elite, when we see rich people, we must think that they must be smarter than us. But really, you don't know what's in their minds. You don't know what they're reading actually. And I think the snake also was there to symbolize like how people fool the uneducated people with just tricks, right? Because that
Hmm.
trick is there so instantly to just fool somebody who doesn't take a close look at it. And just like if you don't take a close look at that old man, you can't see who he really is. Just
Yeah.
like you don't see the snake.
Yeah,
Um,
and also I read it like some website. Then they did like a good symbol summary of the story, and they were saying that like after we see the snake in that scene, we see the uncle, and the uncle has like a black mouth, like he licked the ink and stuff like that, and his like lips and his tongue is like black. And here in this piece, the writer says like, that ink sort of represents the venom of the uncle, like how the uncle has venom and he's sort of like evil and things like that. So yeah.
I would say the thing that I was thinking about this scene with the uncle licking the pen is that I was thinking that he just copies whatever he sees the colonizers do or the aristocrats do, because the overall environment of this movie is that these are people who have been subjugated, and we're looking at the elites of this country mimic the ways of the people that have dominated them. So like I don't, it's sort of like how when the slaves would dress up like the masters, right? They would try to wear their clothes and stuff like that
Hmm.
and pretend to be like them, but it's not them. So like he probably saw some rich European lick a pencil and said, "Oh, this is what rich white people do." You get what I'm saying? Or
Yeah.
he saw the Japanese do that. So I thought that was to symbolize that he is a bastardized or corrupted version of what he thinks an elite is, if that makes
Mm,
sense.
yeah, yeah. No, that's definitely, I think, a part of it.
Yeah. So after that, or a little bit ahead, Suki is not really gelling well in the place. The other maids at the house like pick on her. They try to like hide her shoes and have her walking around in socks and stuff like that. But then later, this man appears, and this man is the count. He's supposed to be a rich aristocrat who is Japanese, who is coming to persuade Lady Hideko to marry him, right?
Mhm.
And he calls himself Count Fujiwara. And Count Fujiwara is supposed to come and convince her to not marry her uncle because since the Uncle Kazuki's wife died, now he's going to probably marry his niece. What did you think when you first saw the count?
Um, I don't know. Like, I didn't really read much into it, but I don't know. I guess like he didn't seem like a trustable character.
Mhm.
I guess like just the first time seeing
Mhm.
it.
Right.
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
if you read the summary of the story is that all along Suki was actually in on a scam. And the scam was that she was going to work with this man who is posing as Count Fujiwara, this rich Japanese man, but he's actually a Korean swindler. He's going to convince this woman, the rich Japanese woman, Lady Hideko, to marry him so that he can take her money and put her in an insane asylum. And Suki and him will split the money. That's what the summary of the story is. So if you know that, then you know when you see this man, okay, this is where the movie starts rolling. And then after that, you don't know what to expect next.
Yeah.
And so, Suki is a part of the plan. She's talking with the with Count Fujiwara, behind his back. We see a little bit of Suki's background that she was born into a family of like pickpockets and thieves and swindlers and stuff like that. And that the Korean guy said that he had this plan together for months, and this is going to be the one that will set them all up for life. And so Suki and him work on this, and yeah, Suki then starts developing feelings for Lady Hideko. Like there's an intimate bath scene where she's like washing her, and there's other moments where they share times of tenderness and glances at each other that show that some affection is building for them. Right.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, at the same time, Count Fujiwara tries to, compliment Lady Hideko, He tries to, put his hands on her and be alone with her and stuff like that. But it always looks like, from Suki's perspective, that Lady Hideko is not feeling this guy at all. He ain't got no game. He ain't got no game.
Yeah.
What did you think of that part of the movie?
I mean, I was thinking like, yeah, I was kind of thinking like Suki here. I was thinking like, okay, this count is like gross. Like he's trying to grope her. He's trying to like, force himself onto her. So I was like really hating him at this point. I was like he's a scammer, but like, and he's doing it for the money. So why is he like, he's doing it for the money, but why is he also like trying to sexually harass this woman? Just
Right.
like, act like you're in love and take your money and go. Like, why are you, touching her and stuff like that?
Yeah. I mean, for a scammer, you would think they would have a good mouthpiece. Like they would know exactly the words to say to make a woman fall all over them. And especially if the choice is between you, a relatively handsome young man, or an old, lecherous, sick, nasty weirdo in the library, you would think it would be very easy to convince that woman to marry you. But
Yeah.
it really looked like he was struggling. I've never seen such a limited game in action.
Yeah. And also like, there was that whole thing with Count Fujiwara kind of seeing Lady Hideko as like a stale person, like a cold person.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, deep down, he wasn't really attracted to her. He was in it for the money at first, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, what happens next? What happens
I
next?
don't know. I guess like we have like these sort of scenes where kind of there's like some sexual tension between Suki and Hideko, like the bathtub scene where Suki is helping Hideko with her teeth, I
Hmm.
guess, and then like yeah, there's like some tension, and I think like there I thought like, oh, okay, is something gonna happen? Like
Hmm.
something is like happening. I don't know what it is. I don't know like if it's gonna be something sexual or if it's like a sort of like a true friendship companion sort of thing. And I guess like I was also rooting for Suki to just like help Hideko
Hmm.
because at that time we see Hideko as this like vulnerable, pure, kind of naive person who's just like a prisoner of her uncle.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I was kind of like waiting for Suki to just like help her and turn on Count Fujiwara. So yeah, like I was feeling those things, and she was trying to play the middle ground, right? She was like she didn't want to hurt Lady Hideko too much, but then she also like had this sort of responsibility and promise to the Count, and also
Right.
she wanted like to be free of her like poverty.
Hmm.
So like she wanted to like have nice clothes, and she didn't want to worry about like where to stay, what to eat, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, at this part of the movie, I was definitely like, I was rooting for Hideko to like get free of her thing, and I could trust her. And at the same time, you're also rooting for Suki to, get free as well from poverty or from working as just a maid or stuff like that. But also for me as well, I'm kind of also rooting for Count Fujiwara because his motivation is to get out of this horrible situation where he's a poor Korean man in a colony of Japan where everybody's treated like second class citizens and stuff like that. So honestly, I have sympathy for most, if not all, of the characters here, and also to some extent Uncle Uncle Kazuki. But I'm gonna get to that when we get to the second part. But finally, there's like the a sex scene, right? Big sex scene
Yeah.
comes. So the sex scene is after you know Count Fujiwara takes out Hideko on a date, and Hideko is like, I don't know if I really like him. I might, not really feel him and stuff like that. I'm a virgin. She says she's a virgin and that she doesn't know what to do at night alone with a man in bed. And so she's laying there with Suki, telling her all of this. And then they, slowly start to make make love. I don't know if you want to describe it because I got some comments about this sex scene.
Okay, okay. Well, basically, Hideko is like, what happens like after you kiss? She's asking about like the after like the wedding night, basically. She's like, I don't know what to do. Like, how does this go? And then yeah, Suki is like basically trying to explain her, but she's demonstrating it at the same time. Like, oh, this is what Count would see, and this is what he would think, and this is what he would do. And Hideko is saying like, oh, show me. And there's just like a very lustful, passionate sort of lovemaking scene that's happening, and we can sense that they actually just want to make love to each other without thinking about the Count, right?
Hmm.
But they use him sort of like as an excuse, as a narrator in the story, I guess, in their lovemaking story. And then yeah, like they start making love.
Yeah, that sex scene was like hentai in person. Like if you've ever seen any sort of hentai online for research purposes, it's exactly like that. Oh, will the count like this? Will he be gentle like that? Oh, touch me there. Oh no, Suki. Oh, Hideko. And then the scene when she looks at the coochie and and she says, "It's so beautiful," with like a little quiver in her lip and like her eyes all watery, like the
Yeah.
emoji. It was insane. It was pretty funny. It was like the funniest dialogue during a sex scene. And
Yeah, well,
yeah, I definitely got the feeling here that this movie had some male direction.
yeah, definitely.
Like it was.
I was gonna say the same thing. Like after seeing this movie, I definitely in my head said like this is a male director,
Yeah,
probably.
right. And I think that's a bigger criticism against the male director, why he probably didn't deserve to win Director of the Year, because he's going to criticize something later in the movie by making it the villain. But meanwhile, he does the same thing on film if we're going to really have a meta analysis of this movie.
Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff that I read, people were saying that that they could see like the director was hinting at himself
Hmm.
when he depicted Count Fujiwara.
Right.
Some people said like, okay, no, it was the uncle. The director was the uncle because uncle says something like, "I'm just a dirty old man who likes dirty old like stories" or something
Right.
like
Right.
that, you know.
Right.
So people were like, okay, like, is this the director? Because he depicts the sex scenes and I guess like you know he's like doing this very male gaze erotica,
Hmm.
and people were like, okay, so I guess like the director is one of these characters, or maybe like a combination of both,
Right. I,
because people were saying like he wasn't trying to hide his like I guess like male gaze and
hmm
or like objectification of women. He wasn't trying to hide it. It was like part of his narrative and story basically, and I can understand that because even though I can tell that that sex scene was like from a male gaze, because it was all very like aesthetically pleasing, right? Like and a lot of the scenes, like also the last scene, but we'll get to that, had symmetry, like, or the 69 scene, I guess they all had like symmetry, so it appears more pretty or aesthetic to the eye. And but I can acknowledge that even though if it's a male gaze, it's still like beautiful. You know what I mean?
I think we just have to be um, honest about why we think that the sex scene gives the vibe of, oh, a man made this. I think it all comes down to the scissoring. And I'm not a lesbian. I'm not a lesbian, and I don't think you're a lesbian either, right? So
No.
I think I don't know. I've only heard that scissoring is not actually what any lesbian does or anybody who partakes in lesbianism. So there's that. There's like a major scissoring scene where they like clasp hands like Kobe and Shaq. And there's just a lot of just dialogue that doesn't seem like it's natural between two women
Mm.
who are making love.
I mean, I would imagine that, like, I guess, from what I've watched in the media, in the corn industry, and also, like, just in general, I would imagine, like, that position, like, the scissoring position, is kind of, like, hard to
Hmm.
reach orgasm.
Right.
But, and also, like, with all of the toys and stuff that we have today, I would imagine maybe it's not that popular.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, like, I can acknowledge that.
Now, is there an argument that maybe, two girls who are, sexually inexperienced might do something like that? Like, hey, let's just rub our stuff together to see if that's good, or let's just do different positions and see what works. Yeah, I think that's possible. But if we're going to tell the story, maybe it would be more real to have more realistic positions and things like that. And I think this is a good time to talk about something else in the movie. Like, does lesbianism or the love between Suki and Hideko, whether it's real or not, is that actually a central part of the story? Because before starting this, we were talking, and you were reading some comments from people online who were
Mhm.
saying that this is a movie about two lesbians who kick ass and stuff like that. And I
Yeah.
just don't see it, in my opinion. What do you think?
I think I would say that it's more about women in general and how society like portrays women and what society expects from women, rather than lesbianism in the story or
Hmm.
love. I would say that's a bigger theme in the movie. But
I
yeah,
would say that the lesbianism, the love scenes in this movie were entirely superfluous. The love between Hideko and Suki could have strictly been platonic, and everything would have been the same. It would have had the same effect. But I'm not mad that they are lesbian characters. I'm just upset that people would see the lesbianism in this movie as a big part of the theme, because there's nothing else in this movie that talks about the fight for them to be together is the fight against the homophobia that they're facing. Not at
hmm
all.
hmm
So
yeah.
that's just what I have to say.
I mean, I do think like the love that they have was an important symbol, but it wasn't like the theme of the story,
Hmm.
because every time that they made love, it was always like the two of them, right?
Hmm.
It was like this separate, just special environment for them to like explore their sexuality and like also realize their I don't know, like feelings and stuff like that. But then also on the other hand, we had like sort of like public sex scenes, I guess, not sex scene, but like the erotica storytelling,
Hmm.
which was public.
Right.
And
Oh,
yeah, we'll get to that.
yeah. All right. Well, let's just jump ahead. So Hideko and Suki have sex. We imagine that now there's like some bond between them. Count Fujiwara is still trying to get at Hideko, but she's not feeling it. Uncle Kazuki has to travel out of town, so he leaves. And when he leaves, Count Fujiwara, Hideko, and Kazuki all run away. They all run away and get on a boat and head to Japan. And Count Fujiwara does convince Hideko to marry him and that sort of stuff. And they get married in Japan. But after living together for a while, the Count ends up saying that Hideko is crazy, and he calls the doctors to come and take her away. And the doctors come, they sit down with Suki, and they say, "What's wrong with the missus?" And she says she needs to be locked away. And so they all go together to the insane asylum in Tokyo or whatever. And Suki thinks that they're going to lock up the missus, and she decides to betray. We think that Suki has decided to betray Hideko, but what actually
Mhm.
happens is that Hideko betrayed Suki and let her go into the insane asylum because she knew all along, and that was a big twist, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, what did you think of that scene when it came to that?
yeah. Like sort of like when they're in the house and Count brings this like whole big bag of money and puts in front of Suki, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like there we understand that this is his payment for her.
Mm-hmm.
And then Hideko is also there, but she doesn't say anything. She does look at like Suki in a way that's like, oh, you betrayed me type of way.
Mm-hmm.
But she doesn't say anything. She doesn't scream. She doesn't like get mad and stuff like that. So there, I was thinking like, why isn't she saying anything?
Well, possibly the money was brought there as like he got the money as he promised because he told Hideko that we're gonna run away to Japan. Let me take care of the money. You don't even I'll be there to protect you. And so they all go together. So him just pulling out money doesn't automatically mean it's for her.
I
You know what I
guess
mean?
like yeah, I was thinking the same thing, but I was also thinking like, why would he put it in front of Suki and like she opens it and stuff like
Right.
that?
I
She's just
think
a maid
yeah.
still.
I think there
But
was still some plausible deniability there if there
yeah,
was that scheme. But we know secretly that there wasn't that scheme anyway. But go ahead.
yeah, like I still didn't think in my mind, oh, like Hideko is the actual plotter. I didn't think that, but I was kind of like, I was like, this is weird.
Mm-hmm.
And but yeah, like when that happened, I thought it was like a twist and it reeled me back into the story.
Right, right, absolutely. When I just thought it was clever that they thought the missus was crazy because she thought she was the handmaid. That's just like a clever way to put somebody in jail
Yeah.
because Suki is saying they tell her, "No, come here, miss," and she's like, "No, I'm not. I'm the handmaid. Listen to me." That was pretty funny. I really
Yeah.
thought somewhere in the movie they were going to do something about Suki and Hideko saying earlier, "We look kind of alike," right?
Hmm.
And they did kind of do it there, but I thought there was going to be a scene like, "Oh no, that was Suki all along," or "That was Hideko pretending to be Suki," or something like that in
Yeah.
one of the scenes. I thought that would have been interesting, but it didn't happen. Generally, though, I got to say this because I'm gonna give like a little commentary, my opinion, real quick.
Mhm.
Generally, though, when it comes to like surprises and twists in movies and stuff like that, I feel like I was not hella surprised. Not saying like I saw it coming or anything like that, but it wasn't that type of reveal that made you say wow or oh or something like that. It was just like oh okay, all right, okay, this is interesting, but it
Yeah.
wasn't like a big shocker. It didn't feel like there was a big buildup. Like the movie has like subtle twists, not like these big wraparound turnaround twists that just
Yeah.
get you going. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. I guess like yeah, I understand. I mean, I guess that's part of it being a slow burn, and then also like we have seen up until like 2024 a lot of movies that had like this sort of like surprise twist, and then where they go back in time and explain the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it did like this sort of movie lost its like magic because
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the first time I saw a movie like that where you had like this character's other side revealed,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh my god, this is like perfect, like this is insane.
Mm-hmm.
And then you like rewatch it from another perspective, and I thought that was like just so clever.
Right.
But I do feel like it's kind of played out.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't bad here, but yeah, like just maybe I don't know. Maybe if I saw this in 2016, I would have been more impressed.
Right, right. I mean, going back to what we said about Saltburn, right? Like my critique of Saltburn is that I just don't feel anything for this person who's being devious and people that are scheming and scamming. And
Hmm.
when the twist turns back around on them or there's some plot change, it's hard for me to get into that because I feel like a lot of these movies are being made over and over again with this idea of people plotting and scheming on the rich to take their
Yeah,
riches and stuff like that. So it's hard for me to, get
yeah.
those fires going.
Yeah, I guess, but also like I guess what makes make this movie special is that there's like three twists.
Yeah,
So it's not like you have one and that's the end of the movie. So I guess that's like also something different
right.
about this movie.
Right, right. I want to say though, another thing that, like we said, this is a long movie, 2 hours and 30 minutes, and a slow burn. But there are some very funny scenes throughout the movie that keep you
Yeah.
sort of entertained. There are parts that make you chuckle a bit. They shock you a bit. And one of the scenes that I hate that I skipped over is that there was a scene between Count Fujiwara and Suki when they were talking in the field, and Count Fujiwara said something like, "You're messing up my plan. Like you're supposed to convince her to fall in love with me." And then he grabs Suki's hand and puts it on his hard crotch and says, "Don't you feel how bad I want her, or I want the money, or something like that?" And it's
Yeah.
just those few scenes during this very long, slow burning movie that keep you back up, like wake you back up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's definitely like hidden dark humor. Sometimes not even hidden, sometimes just like out there.
Hmm.
And yeah, that was like a pretty good part of the movie because it contained like, different like how do you say that? Like different types of humor.
Yeah.
Some of them were like dark humor and then some of them were like just over there just to make you laugh and giggle and stuff like that. And also like that scene was also, I guess, like you see this man who's getting an erection thinking about money and wealth. So it says like something about the character as well in a funny way.
Yeah, yeah. He's just
It
horny
wasn't
for the
like
money.
empty jokes as well.
Yeah, yeah. No, the jokes and the parts of the movie that lighten it up or bring you back in reveal more about the characters. And I will have to say this: I feel like there was good character development here. Would you say
Yeah.
so?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And for how complex this movie is, I'm glad they kept it to a tight cast because there's really only like four main characters: Suki, Hideko, Uncle Count Fujiwara, and Uncle no Uncle
Kuzuki, yeah.
Kazuki.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of characters. Let me try to remember their names.
Yeah. And also like just throwing it out here, acting was really good as well.
Acting was very good.
It
Acting,
never
yep.
like I never felt like cringe.
Yeah. I feel
Yeah.
like I seen the guy who played Count Fujiwara. I feel like I've seen him before in something. Maybe he was in Squid Game. Maybe he was in Parasite. I don't know. He looks famous.
No, he wasn't in them.
Right. I don't know. He looks like somebody Doja Cat has a crush on.
Wow. No.
Anyway, so yeah, all right. So when the big reveal or twist happens that Hideko is in on the plan to put Suki in jail, we're like, okay, what happens? And Suki says something like, Hideko has always been a major bitch. And so we go to part two of the movie. And in part two of the movie, we go back to Hideko's childhood. She's a very, very young girl, I believe like 5 years old or something like that. And she lives at the same mansion that she was at before. And she's learning every day Japanese. And she's being forced Japanese, even though she lives in Korea, right?
Hmm.
And she's being taught to read slowly by her aunt, who is the wife of her uncle, of course, right?
Yeah.
And they sit in the library all day, and first they're learning like ear, nose, eye, shoulder in the books and stuff like that. But then the pages slowly reveal words like penis, vagina,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And the uncle is sitting at the table while they're listening, and every time she makes a mistake or laughs or giggles, he like beats her. He pulls out like these big beads and just like beats her on the hand with it. If his wife or his niece start like laughing and stuff like that, he puts like the gloves on their faces until they almost suffocate. And
Hmm.
yeah, he's just like exposing that girl to like pornography at like a very, very young age. What
Yeah.
did you think about that big reveal that Uncle Kazuki is a pervert?
Yeah, like it was interesting, like just to, re-see like some of the materials that I think like Suki found those like metal balls in Hideko's room when she was like snooping around in the beginning of the movie. And then we see like basically how Hideko like stores away her trauma. Like
Mm,
he gives her the beads and he says like, remember this every time you make a mistake or talk back to your like uncle or something like that. And we see how like, Hideko like just, stores that trauma within her. And we can understand like how much she's afraid of like uncle because she actually kept them.
mhm.
She could have thrown them away and said that she kept them or something like that, but she actually keeps them. And also like about the reveal of Uncle Kuzuki, there was like some like hinting that he was like a weird dude, right? Like not weird at least, but like there was some hinting that he did something bad to Hideko like when she was growing up. And it was like an interesting sort of um I don't know, interesting choice of like villainism, I guess, because we don't see him just like actually physically abusing Hideko, but he's sort of doing it psychologically.
Well, there is that scene where he does hit her over the hand with the balls and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
then the scene with the gloves. So yeah, we don't see all the abuse. Maybe there was worse than that.
Yeah,
And
I'm,
as
I'm
far as
talking about like sexuality wise.
right,
Like we never see him like touch Hideko like that.
hmm
Obviously, like yeah, he beats her up and stuff. But yeah, and also like in some piece that I read about this movie, they were saying that like the theme of colonialism in this movie, it's kind of like a fantasy, and also in the real life, like this writer was saying that colonialism is like a fantasy, and like when you fantasize about things like that, like Uncle Kuzuki, it's also like it's kind of mashed up with his sexual fantasies and his like being a Japanese person fantasies, if that makes sense.
that's what I really want to rant on right now. I really want to talk about that because I feel like okay, there is some sympathy to be had for Uncle Kazuki. I think we can't just wash him away as some evil, sick, twisted villain, right? Number one, he didn't, assault his niece, like as in he never got on top of her and tried to take it from her, right? The whole movie is about, he is eventually going to marry her, but he could have done that at any time, and he didn't do that, right? He is obsessed with being Japanese as he can, as Japanese as possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he is a man whose mind has been twisted because of colonialism and stuff like that. And I believe that in some way, his way of resisting colonialism was by number one, abusing, and this sounds bad, but abusing the child or a child who was left in his presence from the colonizer. And on top of that, by delving headfirst into the sickest and worst parts of Japanese culture, at least, if you look at, pornography or writing about sex as sick and twisted, he wanted to delve as deep into that as possible to see into the mind of his enemy and also to expose it to others in some sick, perverse way, if that makes sense. I,
Yeah.
I feel like on one hand, he had a true disdain and hate for his circumstance as a Korean person who was under Japanese occupation, which is why he took all that anger out on Hideko to some degree, and like forced her to speak Japanese. If y'all want to force colonialism on us, then we're going to go all the way to the max. We're going to read all the great classics, the octopus and the MILF. You know what I mean? We're going to go deep.
Hmm.
You get what I'm saying? I think there's a lot psychologically happening with Uncle Kazuki that's very interesting. What do you think?
Yeah, of course. Like I definitely agree with like all the inner violence that he has with the colonialist thoughts and Japanese and all of that. That's understandable, not excusable, but also like I do think also another theme with Uncle is that like he kind of portrays this like toxic tradition that women have no voice in the society because even though Hideko owned all of the fortune because he was the she inherited the fortune, um, she couldn't do anything or say anything, and Uncle basically owned her voice if not her body. And yeah, that was like, also hinting at that societal roles, especially during that time, that like, women have no voice literally of their own within the presence of men.
Right, right, right. I think you know, Uncle Kazuki plays into like a lot of themes because in a lot of movies you often have rich people doing like sick, twisted stuff, Eyes Wide Shut, some of the other movies and stuff like that. And I
Mhm.
also think maybe in Asian culture there's like this theme of like an old perverted man because growing up we used to watch Dragon Ball Z and one of the main characters, I believe the man that adopted Goku, Goku's the main character of Dragon Ball Z, right? And the father of Goku is like this old horny man who's always trying to sleep with everybody and everything, right? And I feel like that that sort of how can I say this? Thing maybe is another part of Kazuki's personality. Maybe he was introduced to Japanese culture and said, "Oh, this is a character I can also be like." But yeah, also in general too, there's another thing that he is a man that uses women for sex work to gain profit and to make himself larger. Because another way he makes money outside of the gold mine is that he has rich, presumably Korean and Japanese men come to his house and listen to the erotic stories that his wife reads. He makes his wife read these nasty, dirty Japanese stories to all these men who sit there and almost come and then they get spanked on. Then he has his wife spank these men on the butt and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's torture for his wife and stuff like that. So he's living like a pimp. He's living like a sick librarian pimp. He's a librarian pimp. Ain't that something? Who knew that existed? What an interesting job.
Yeah, that's a good description. And yeah, also I think like from the director's point of view, I'm just gonna go to a bit of cinematography here. Like those scenes where the girls, the aunt and Hideko were reading the stories, we often like always saw like a cut to the men, right?
Mhm.
We were looking at their expressions and their little grunts and stuff like that, which was I think also interesting, like way of showing that this was specifically done for the pleasure of men,
Mhm.
and that the girls who were reading it didn't like actually get any pleasure from it.
Right. Now, I have to say this though. I have to say this. Is reading a nasty book to a room full of men as degrading as being a stripper or a porn star or an OnlyFans model? I mean, is it really that degrading? She never had to get naked, never had to sleep with anybody, nothing like that. Is it really? Is this really a good comparison? Because I feel like the movie is trying to make the point that sex work can be degrading if it's not done by women autonomously, independently, on their own choice, right?
Yeah.
But if we're actually looking at what they had to do, is it really that bad? Is it really that bad? I'm opening that
Yeah.
door. Nothing. This is Simon Hill Keeps It True. We talk about everything.
Yeah, I think it's still degrading. It's not physical, it's psychological. And yeah, like it's bad. Imagine you have to sit in a room full of like old white ladies and you have to like read fantasies about like black men and old white ladies and stuff like that. Like imagine how degrading that you would feel, or how disgusted you would feel, even though you're not like being touched or you're
Mm,
not like getting naked and stuff like that. So I think it's still as bad as like like I guess like forced stripping. I don't know, like people who strip because they are forced into that and not because they actually want to. Like there's nothing wrong with actually like reading erotica or stripping, unless like if you really want to, that's fine. Or if this is what you enjoy, that's fine, right? But
mhm.
if you're being forced into that type of thing, then that's when it gets like problematic and toxic.
Okay. Okay. Now, if that's problematic and toxic, isn't it also toxic to hire actors to act in a movie as lesbians doing sick sex scenes, 69ing, scissoring, and all sorts of stuff like that for the enjoyment of men? Is this not also what the director is doing in his actual movie, or the writer is doing in the actual movie? They want to make this commentary about how it is degrading for women to act like or read sexual material for men or do sex acts for men for our own enjoyment and not for theirs. Is that not
No,
also the same thing that the film is doing?
no, because it's consensual, and also like they're not shooting like underground pornography. They're doing like a art. This is like their work, their hard work, their sweat, and into going like a piece of art. They know what the society is like, I'm pretty sure, and they know what their audience is like, and they're giving the script ahead, and they're all consensual like players and adults and actors, so it doesn't go into that category of like exploitation, in my opinion.
I think consent gets a bit fuzzy when we start talking about the modern world because people can say, well, you have consent to be a Hollywood actress, but you won't get as many roles unless you show boob. Show boob. We want boob. And is there really consent, as an actress, if like in most of the major roles, the big movies, they say, hey, we need you to get topless in this. You get what I'm saying? Is that really consent?
I think in this movie particularly, yes, I think it is full consensual, because it's one thing showing like a side boob or a nipple, but like in this movie they're full on like just basically making love. And I'm sure there are like tips and tricks where like they do to make the actors feel comfortable. Like I don't know, like some fabric that we can't see that covers her private parts and stuff like that, like when they were shooting that coochie scene and things. So I think like a film like this has to be like fully consensual and all of that. Like it has to be fully disclosed.
There
And I,
is
I
you
feel
think there
like
is consent here. I think this is where I totally disagree with you because once again the love scenes, the sex scenes, the romance between Hideko and Suki was totally unnecessary and was only there for male enjoyment or for if people just want to see a story that's glorified lesbo porn, honestly, if that's your thing.
yes,
Because
but you don't think women know this better than men do? Women can sense this better than men do. So I'm sure like the main actors Suki and Hideko, who played like those roles, they already knew this, but they viewed it like as an art. Yes, they weren't necessary, but they were part of the script. And like I said, like out of all the people, women would feel this the most.
I feel like I feel like while women, are you saying that women can feel the romance between Hideko and Suki, or feel what? What exactly are you saying? Feeling with
Women
it?
can feel the exploitation that they're being like subjected to the most, because
Right.
that's like what our, like, that's coming to us. That's something negative on us. But I guess like overall, my argument would be that like none of the erotic scenes in this movie were like kind of, how do you say it, they didn't felt cheesy, they didn't felt like I agree with you that they didn't have to be there, but they didn't feel like I don't know, like unnatural or cheesy or just like a part of like a
Acty, stop, stop, stop. When we were watching the movie, we were laughing during the first sex scene. Stop. We were saying, "What is this dialogue? What is happening? Is this an anime?" We were saying that. What do you? Don't say that now. No, no,
yeah,
no.
but
Let's go ahead.
yeah, okay, like we can see the influence of anime and stuff like that, but it doesn't take away from the sincerity of the scene.
Mm. I think once again, if that scene when we discovered that Uncle Kazuki is making art, what he considers to be art, and making people read this, what he considers to be art, pornography in written word, he is thinking the same thing that a director is thinking. He is directing a movie for them. They didn't have pictures back then. They didn't have cinematography back then. But what they had was essentially the same thing: a movie for men to look at and be told a story with sex scenes interspersed throughout the story. How is that not a copy and paste rendition of the same thing? When we were watching the movie and she was reading, it wasn't just all sex scene. It was just like they were walking in the forest and then she touched his cock and stuff like that, right? I mean, it's how is that any different than this movie where Suki literally grabs a cock? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
no, I think there are some similarities, and like I said, some of the critics were comparing like Uncle and Count to the director, and I think
mhm,
that's why like I think that's a strength of the director, that, and also like I guess like openness and honesty of the director, that he's not denying that he's somewhat toxic when it comes to certain things about women, and he is like objectifying women in his life as well.
mhm.
Not like obviously willingly or consciously, or maybe even sometimes consciously, but he's owning that. He's owning that. But the main difference between what Uncle is doing and what the director is doing is consent.
I think, okay, no, I have to clarify what I mean by consent. Of course, none of the actors here, especially the women, I don't think they had like guns to their head or whatever saying, you're going to act in this movie, right? But
Yeah.
what I mean by consent is that we are all living in the confines of what we can do with money or how we earn money and that sort of stuff. Like, for example, me, there are things that I want to do, right, with my life, right? I would rather sit down on the couch and play guitar all day, but I have to work. Now, somebody would say, well, Simon, nobody forces you to sit at the computer and teach English class, but it's something that I have to do. Therefore, there is partially no consent in me working. Even if I didn't work as an English teacher, I would have to do something to make money, right? So there's some limit to the amount of freedom that I actually have. And so if we go back in time and dial it back, right, the women in this story do have some sort of freedom and autonomy. They can try to escape from where they come from and stuff like that, just like anybody in a situation where they are literally trapped, right? Like if you're a
Hmm.
slave, you can try to run away. If you're in prison, you can try to dig a tunnel, Shawshank Redemption, but you have confines around that. And so the women here have no consent to some degree. They have very limited consent. Like the same way now I have limited consent. And the same way a lot of women now have limited consent when it comes to their opportunities as well. If you really want to be the top Hollywood actress, you gotta show boob. Showing boob is a part of the deal. If you want to blow up, you gotta do that. If you want to be the biggest black male actor, you gotta wear a dress. There's some things that limit the consent that we actually do give. Does that make sense?
Yes, of course, if you generalize it and look at it from like a broader spectrum, like the big picture, then like nobody has full consent in their lives. It's like freedom, right? Like you can discuss, nobody is fully free because we have obligations and things like that. But like, I guess, okay, so then what matters here, or the difference here, is the degree of the consent. Then like
Mm-hmm.
in the actual movie, like Hideko had like, I don't know, 5% consent. Like
Mm-hmm.
there was like 5% of things that she can do to escape. Like that
Mm-hmm.
was either like suicide or like running away.
Right.
But in real life, let's say like they do want to be like that sort of Hollywood big actresses, and they do this movie, then they have like 80% consent then.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's a difference between the levels of consent, if that's like what you're going for.
That is what I'm going for. And I know somebody's going to twist that to say, well, Simon, what you're saying is slavery is a choice. No, I'm not going there. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that there are limits to our freedom. And when we do consent to something, it is often confined. We have limits that make us make certain choices. If
Yeah.
we're able to make choices at all. Honestly, I don't believe we have free will. Everything is determined already. But that's another thing. Whatever we imagine our choices to be, there are no choices that are made totally free. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah. Because I mean, I don't know. You can't see life like that, because everything is connected and tied into another. Obligation is tied into your freedom. Responsibility is tied into your freedom. Your wealth is tied to your freedom. So how are you going to have 100% of one thing and not have the other thing? So it's like a machine that works together.
Right. I mean, that's a deeper philosophical topic,
Yeah.
but I really, really think, people that want to applaud this movie and say, oh, it's so brilliant, they're showing liberated lesbians, you could easily say the same thing for one of Mr. Uncle Kazuki's nasty books. They showed liberated lesbians in a story. I
Yeah.
think there's a.
Like, yeah,
Uh-huh.
I mean, obviously there's nothing wrong with like erotica literature. That's
Hmm.
fine. Like if you take a book and read it and enjoy it, like that's also a form of art. But it changes, the tone changes when you have to like force someone into reading it to you, or
Right.
impose that into a little child and things like that.
Right. I think the bigger humiliation for the women who are reading is not the fact that they're reading erotica or that they have to do weird sex acts like spank these rich, powerful Japanese and Korean men. The real shame in it and humiliation comes from actually reading Japanese. Throughout the entire movie, the struggle for a lot of the characters is reading or picking up this new foreign language and that sort of stuff and the strain that it has on their minds. Because
Mm.
Hideko grew up speaking Japanese, learned Japanese, and read every single day and hated the language. Suki couldn't even read it. Mr. Fujiwara, like, probably went through a lot to learn how to speak it and that sort of stuff, and
Yeah.
passed himself off as Japanese. And of course, the Uncle Kazuki is torturing people with the Japanese language. So I think the movie is making a criticism at the occupation that happened to Korea and
Hmm.
how it warped the mind and how the language itself was like a true villain in the movie, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what I was thinking. Go ahead.
No, definitely. Like the reading hints to different things. It hints to like colonialism, obviously, just like you said. It also like I think there's hints to like elite and like I guess like the sort of elite and lower class created by colonialism because here like as a consequence of the occupation and colonialism like done by Japan to Korea, Japan is seen as the elite. Like if you're Japanese, you're elite, no
Mm-hmm.
matter like what your income is. I guess like just like Count Fujiwara.
Mm-hmm.
And then like if you're Korean, then you're not elite, and you're just
Mm-hmm.
like a a lower class person, a second class person.
Right.
So yeah, there's also like that sort of discrimination of class that comes with colonialism as well.
Right. And in this secret, dark library, miles away from anybody else, instead of, plotting to overthrow Japan or reading secretly in Korean, great Korean erotica or something like that, these people are all gathered around to read the nastiest Japanese books they can
Mm.
find, which I think goes to show, once again, like Mr. Kazuki was obsessed with Japan's depravity because he saw the depravity of how they conquered their people, slaughtered their people, and stuff like that, stole their resources, and he was obsessed with the depravity of their conquerors as well. And I think there was a fascination with the grotesque. He
Yeah,
was fascinated, sexually aroused by the thing that he finds the most disgusting,
yeah,
if that makes sense.
yeah.
So yeah, Mr. Kazuki is actually the hero in this movie because all throughout it he is fighting imperialism, and
Okay.
that's why this movie is ass backwards. People got it totally wrong.
Wow. Okay.
Should we continue with the story?
Yeah. Please.
Okay. So anyway, this is actually Hidoko's background. She's basically a porn reader for these people and stuff like that. There's a very interesting scene where she has to act out one of the scenes in a book, and they bring down this wooden man, and she mounts the wooden man, and is suspended in the air. This in similar to what's being described in the book. I guess in the book, people had sex in the air. What did you think of that scene? Because that was one of the weirdest.
Yeah, that was I don't know, like that was a pretty weird scene. But I think the reason that they showed that was like following that scene, they also like showed another scene where Hideko is reading a story about like two lesbians,
Hmm.
and I guess like it was hinting like the story read for the males and male perspective, and then the story where she kind of like she was still reading for the guys, but she was also like kind of reading for herself as well, and maybe they showed it to show that contrast. I don't know.
Maybe I was thinking the entire time. Does she have like a very large like wooden stick up in her that's keeping her suspended? Like, did she do
Yeah.
that many Kegels to like be that tight on it? Because that's a strong pussy. That's a
Wow. I
powerful
think
pussy.
I think she was sitting in a chair,
You think she was sitting
but
in a chair? That was just a straight man there. I don't know. I thought they attached something real strong up in it.
wow, wow, that just makes me clench in
Yeah,
somewhere particular.
yeah, I can imagine. Anyway, so we find out actually that Hideko met Mr. Fujiwari because he was one of the people who found a way to make it into Uncle Kazuki's inner circle, who was invited to one of the reading events. And so he approaches her at the mansion before Suki arrives or anything like that, and says, "Look, you're in a situation right now. Your mother, hung herself. You're probably going to get married to your nasty uncle. You don't look happy. Let's do this. I don't love you, but run away with me and let's get married. And I'll take the money, and you can go and live in Japan or wherever you want to in the world, and we'll separate." And at first she's not with it, but then she agrees to it, and that begins a whole other series of events. What did you think about Mr. Fujiwari, like and Hideko having that whole deal behind closed doors when you first discovered that?
Yeah, like like I was surprised obviously, and I also thought like so Mr. Count Fujiwara, he said that he was actually like plotting against her, and he was trying to like send her to the madhouse, but then he says like something like I was supposed to seduce you and send you to the med house in the end, but then I saw your eyes, and I will never be able to seduce you because you're like dead inside or something like that. Like you will never be seduced by me. So I'm like just not going to try to do that and instead work with you. And I thought that was like really interesting. Like, I don't know, maybe like he could see like her brokenness, and also I don't know if I could say like her homosexuality, but
Yeah.
I guess like it's more about like her brokenness and her abuse.
No, he had a good gaydar. His gaydar was strong.
Like, yeah, it's either his gaydar, or like, he just felt like, she's never gonna like fall in love with any men because, she has too much of this like exposure to like sexual content.
Hmm.
So yeah, like I thought that was like kind of like very telling of the characters. And also like I also thought Count was just like this man who would just do like anything and switch sides for anybody just to get money and get rich.
Yeah, absolutely. I was very surprised to see that was the turnaround because I thought maybe what happened was that he really fell in love with her during the plan that we thought was happening when Suki was sent there, and he
Hmm.
actually really liked her, so he decided to just flip on Suki and send her to the madhouse. But to know that all along there was a double cross happening,
Yeah.
which goes to show that, damn man, how do you have no game at all when you got two of these broads like fighting against each other? Like this is good and bad pimping at the same time.
I mean, it wouldn't have mattered even if he had game because the girls are like homosexuals.
That's true. Maybe there is a reason for there to be homosexuality in the movie because somebody would have fell in love with Mr. Fujiwara. I don't know. But once again, you could have told the story without the girls being in love, but I won't repeat myself. Anyway, so this is probably the weakest part of the movie, or maybe part of the extended version. And so if you watch this movie, maybe watch the shortened version because what happens next after we find out that Mr. Fujiwara and Hideko secretly all along are planning against Suki, and Suki is just the useful idiot. You see the whole movie again, the very beginning parts,
Yeah.
but from a different perspective. You see it from Hideko's perspective. So at the very beginning, the first night when Hideko screams, somebody help," she secretly planned that all along and stuff like that. Anytime there was intimate moments between Suki and Hideko, there are, we see Hideko's faces, and really, she's not really feeling Hideko like that. She's saying the right things just to get her, and the whole time they were just being, they knew Suki was illiterate. Basically, she couldn't read Japanese. She could speak it, but she couldn't read it. We find out later though that she could write Korean because she does write something later. But yeah, she was just basically a useful idiot for both of them. And
Yeah.
what did you think about that scene when they started playing everything over again?
I mean, like it was interesting that Hideko was the actual person who suggested that she gets a new maid and
Hmm.
that they blame her for it. So she kind of like created this whole situation for herself because
Hmm.
that idea didn't come from the count. But yeah, it was interesting to like see both of the female characters kind of fell for each other,
Hmm.
and like as time went along. And like I did think it was very long of a recap. Like we were talking about this, and like in usually Hollywood or blockbuster movies, if something like this happens, you have like a 1 minute montage
Hmm. Hmm.
of the truth, I guess.
Hmm.
And here it's like 40 minutes of like retelling the whole story. There were some parts that we didn't see before, like in the sex scene. They show like the scissoring scene here where we didn't see it before.
Hmm.
And I guess like the most important part of the recap was, I'm gonna go back to this, but where Hideko reads the lesbian story to the guys.
Hmm.
And I basically read this, but I thought it was a great point. Yeah, so the lights go out because they have like electricity outages in the house. So the lights go out. So then the men disappears, and Hideko like closes her eyes, and she knows the story by heart. She memorized it and she tells it basically. And yeah, it was like the time where she actually read the story for herself and not for
Hmm.
the men. And then we go back to the sex scene where she's kind of like she's doing all these tips and tricks and she's like really good at it. And then Suki says like, "Oh, you must be like a natural."
Hmm.
And we know why she's a natural because she's been reading it, like, and
Hmm.
that's also like the only story that she really enjoys,
Right,
I
right.
guess.
Yeah, and I think that talks about a bigger topic about internalizing some of the negative things and incorporating it into your sexuality. So
Yeah.
we'll talk about that later. But I do think replaying part of the movie and showing more of the sex scene was kind of important because I do believe the sex scene is the moment when they actually do realize they're in love. Because I was thinking the entire time, okay, they're gonna replay the sex scene and you're gonna see like Hideko's face and she's gonna like roll her eyes or look out the window and Mr. Fujiwara there is like giving her the thumbs up, like good job, girl, you really got her going, or something like that. But that didn't happen, and I think it was important for them to have that bond because it shows right then and there that there is some love there. And we skipped over this, but this scene was played twice. The scene where Hideko slaps Suki because Suki keeps on pressing. Hideko to marry Mr. Fujiwara, but she slaps her and says, "I want to marry somebody else," or "What if I'm in love with somebody else?" And then she pushes her out, and she's upset because she's like, "Why is this girl still trying to betray me after she promised she would never lie to me, and she doesn't know who to trust and that sort of stuff."
Yeah.
So there was, and because of that heartbreak, she goes and tries to hang herself like her mother, but Suki saves her right on time, and when she saves her, they both come clean to each other. Like, what did you think of that?
Yeah, that was definitely very interesting because kind of like the first time you watch that scene, you feel like okay, like why does she slap her? Like we get that she's maybe mad that Suki is trying to convince her, but we think like, okay, she doesn't know. Like she's just this naive person, and why does she get like this angry? And then I feel like when we rewatch it from Hideko's point, you feel like Hideko is kind of waiting for that window where she can confess too, because she says like, "What if I told you I was in love with somebody else?" And
Mhm.
she's basically like throwing a bait at Suki and saying like, "If you confess, I'll confess. It's not important," something like that. And well, she doesn't confesses, and she's still going after like her freedom or the money and not her love and bond with Hideko. So she chooses like that instead of love, and I think that's why like Hideko gets so upset. And yeah, like the hanging scene, it was like a kind of like, it was cathartic, but it also was like funny as well, because when Suki learns that Hideko was like playing her, she lets go of Hideko, and Hideko is like suffering, like because she's being hanged, and Suki over there is like cursing at like Count and everyone, like she's getting mad, and then she remembers that Hideko is dying, and then she's like, "Oh, sorry, Mrs." She goes back into saving her. That was like pretty funny.
I laughed really hard during that scene. I was like, this is actually a funny lynching scene. I didn't think that could be possible.
Yeah,
Really funny. So great scene right there. And then that leads us, I guess, to part three, because now the girls are united. They're not fighting.
girl power.
And now the movie moves into, okay, the double cross, double cross, double cross. We got a triple cross coming. Jesus Christ. So now the girls are planning on how to get back at Mr. Fujiwara. So then the movie goes back to the madhouse scene where Suki is taken into the madhouse. This was actually all a part of the plan, because they had written a letter to one of, I believe, Hideko's friends in Japan, that they were going to break out Suki from the madhouse eventually. Meanwhile, the Count Fujiwara and Hideko are at some fancy restaurant, and the Count is saying stuff like, I got the name Count because I was a really poor boy and I would work for like these soldiers, and I spent a whole month's salary on a nice suit and a nice meal, and I really just wanted to not have to worry about how much the wine costs and stuff like that. And that
Yeah.
his motivation was really just to come up out of poverty. What did you think about that little brief scene right there in the restaurant?
Yeah, I think it was like we kind of saw like what Count was truly aspiring to be. Like he said like, I don't really even care about the money. I just don't want to think about the money. And again, I guess like we see like this sort of colonial theme that's also in Count Fujiwara as well. Though like he's a even though like we know that he also wants to be perceived as Japanese, he also, when we see like him and Uncle talking when they first met, Uncle says like Korea is like slow and I don't know, dull and something like that, and Japan is beautiful. And Count Fujiwara says, well, some people say the opposite. Some people
Mm-hmm.
say Japan is slow and dull and Korea is beautiful. So I think there's like still that sort of pride in
Mm-hmm.
him as a
Mm-hmm.
Korean, and he is like somewhat proud of being Korean, or like he's maybe like he has doubtful reasoning to think that Korea is not so bad.
Right.
But that doesn't really stop him from still like wishing and dreaming about being Japanese or being an elite or aristocrat.
Right. I sympathize with Count Fujiwara because, I can see him also like as, like that runaway slave that wanted to make it to Canada. You might,
Mm.
miss home, you might miss your family, but you want freedom. And I think honestly, like he could have honestly used his talents just to like make a passport, make fake documents, fake ID, and just move to Japan. But his greed, he does have a flaw, and that's his greed and love of money, and also some toxic masculine traits because he tries to, take it later. But his greed is his downfall. But there's some honesty there. And once again, like all the characters here, they're dealing with colonialism and oppression in different ways. And his way of doing it is by coming up, it's by scamming. It's like, it's like the main character of Saltburn, but his
Mm-hmm.
motivation is, freedom. It's not empty, just whatever the guy had in Saltburn, whatever his motivations were, if that makes sense. But yeah, what you said about the scene with Korea and Japan, that was actually a really powerful scene too,
Yeah.
because he didn't just hate on Japan like Fuji, Uncle Kazuki. Uncle Kazuki, he doesn't just hate Korea. He just wants better for himself. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Also, another thing that I want to go back to, like when the girls are escaping, they enter the library, right? And then Suki looks at the books and she realizes that Uncle has been making Hideko read all this like sexual stuff. And she feels like really sad and really angry for all the things that Uncle made Hideko do. And then she starts like going around ripping books, putting them in water and soaking them, like just destroying the library basically. And he also like smashes the head of the snake
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. And like I think at that scene, like I don't know if it was then or afterwards when we were talking about the movie, you said like why isn't Hideko like getting angry? Why isn't
Mm-hmm.
she like doing anything?
Mm-hmm.
That part, and also when they're escaping and they're like at a wall, and then Suki just jumps up the wall and she's ready to like run, but Lady Hideko is waiting in the back, like she doesn't know how to climb a wall or something, and Suki gets back down and puts the suitcases like a ladder, like a ladder. Um, my English is struggling, and then like we see Lady Hideko like just going like an elite person that she
Yeah.
is.
Well, she had to break the
And
mental chains.
yeah, and I think in the end she does, and I will reveal it when we talk about the ending.
Mm.
But like even then we see even like these two people who have the purest feelings for each other still have like those class differences within them.
Mm.
You know, like
I didn't
we
notice
see
that.
Suki like just fighting and making a better life for Hideko, just like how a maid does. Maybe I don't know. You know.
Yeah, that's actually very deep. That's actually very deep. But I do think that was one of the flaws of the movie when they do go into the library, break the snake, burn the books, throw them in water. I wish that it was Hideko doing it because I feel like there was kind of no motivation for Suki to get that mad. I mean, she could have seen the naked books and been like, well, this is strange. And then Hideko is something like, no, this is disgusting. This is garbage. This is trash. And then she starts kicking
Mhm.
down stuff. You get what I'm saying? It
Mhm.
would have just been more satisfying to see Hideko do that. But I think that supports my claim that secretly, deep down, Hideko internalized all that stuff, and she could never destroy it because she still looks up to it in a way. You know,
Yeah,
she,
I
she might
think.
be free, but she has that house nigga mentality, and I don't know another way to put it. Stockholm syndrome. Stockholm syndrome. There we go.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. I think it represents more like of her fear rather than like her admiration, I guess, like for the literature that she was forced to read. But yeah, then again, I also think like she still like is looking for someone to, you know, break her chains,
Mm,
and that someone was Suki in that
mm.
scene, and I thought that was like a good, interesting part.
Right, right. So yeah, I forgot exactly. Oh, so at the scene where Count is like talking about his life, he proposes to Hideko again. He says, please marry me, but now you're not Hideko, you're Suki, right? So we're
Mhm.
gonna get married and run off into the sunset. And he says, I actually do kind of like you now, so I kind of want to be with you. I want to see if it's really as beautiful as it was in the scissor scene. You know what I mean? So so she tacitly accepts a little bit, but she's like on the fence, right? She's like
Mhm.
considering it and stuff like that. So later they go to a hotel. Count Fujiwara is like rolling in the money, literally like playing like a little boy who just hit the jackpot. And we forgot to mention this, but Mr. Fujiwara gave her like some poison or like some opium that she could either use to go to sleep or die. And
Yeah.
what she decides to do is that she's going to drug the guy. He's going to drug the count and make him fall asleep and run away with the money and go find Suki. Right? She
Mhm.
goes there. She tries to drug him. He doesn't want to drink the wine. She tries to sleep with him to trick him, and she drinks the wine and puts it in his mouth to make him fall asleep. What did you think about that scene?
Yeah, that was I don't know, it was weird because I think we saw like Lady Hideko there, and also like I got this idea from one of the comments that I read that she was sort of like a femme fatale, you know, like she was poisoning the guy and stuff like that, while guys lust over her because that's kind of like, you know, what a femme fatale is. And it was interesting. It was sort of like, you know, wow, like us as women, we really have to like just do we really have to like just kill the guys just to be free? Like, is this what this has come down to basically? And yeah, I was just like feeling that.
Yeah, I didn't see it like that, as in because I thought she didn't put the whole bottle. Remember, you have to put the whole
Yeah.
bottle to kill the guy, and she only put in 3 or 4 drops, so that was going to put him to sleep. So
I
yeah,
mean, you know, by kill I meant just like poison, I guess. Like it was just a, you know, generalizing speech.
right, right. But I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Like there is that. I mean, there is that strand of feminism that says that women need total separation from men to be actually liberated, right? And I guess
Hmm.
you can look at it that way, as in women will, in this case, Hideko will never be free until the men who have kept her in chains do die, right? But this
Hmm.
is where I think The Color Purple is actually a far superior movie to The Handmaiden, because the men here don't have to die, except
Hmm.
maybe Pa. Like Pa died, but he was old, but his death wasn't necessary. Uh, well, yes, actually, Pa's death was necessary. Some men have to die for women to be liberated in the theory of Color Purple. If we're going to go to color purpleism, some men
Yeah,
have to
I
die.
mean, but it wasn't like, you know, anybody tried. Not any of the women tried to kill him. Like he just died probably of an old age or something. Or yeah, like he died on top of a woman.
He died on top of
So
a woman, right?
it wasn't
And
like he, you know, woman had to get rid of him. He kind of like got his karma, I
right.
guess.
I hate to jump to another movie for anybody listening this far, but in The Color Purple, right, when Celi's father dies, she discovers that wasn't her real father, and also she inherits property that allows her to then rebuild her life. But in The Handmaiden, the men sort of have to die for these women truly to be free because they're so
Yeah.
powerful and they're so conniving and vindictive and vengeful.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that's a debate that y'all women should have because as a man, I can't say none.
Yeah, I was thinking about like, does it have to be like, you know, if one side wants to be free, do we have to hurt the other side? I guess that would be like the more general question
Right.
of that. But that's just a question. Like, I'm not saying it should happen or it shouldn't.
Right. But yeah, basically, the count tries to take it. He tries to jump on top of her. He says, the women that enjoy it the most are the ones who resist. But right before he's about to, mount her, he passes out, and she then gets up, puts all the money in a suitcase, grabs some clothes, like some male clothes, and leaves. Right. The next scene is she meets up with Suki at some hotel or something like that. They reconnect, and then after that, the count wakes up in his hotel to like two samurai police, which has got to be the funniest and scariest thing you've ever seen. Two big motherfuckers with swords waiting for you while you wake up in your underwear. I would check my booty hole as soon as I woke up. I would tap my butt like,
Wow.
"Is everything okay?"
Wow.
And yeah, all his money's gone. Apparently, well, there was a funny scene where his underwear is across the floor, and he still thinks he's in control. He says, "Can you hand me that, gentleman? Like, hand me my my underwear." And yeah, apparently, the uncle found out, he came back home, saw his books were gone. Of course, he was pissed. And so he's calling for everybody to come back, the Count, Suki, Hideko, everybody. But only the Count is found. He's brought back to Mr. Nasty Bookman, Mr. Pervert, and he starts chopping off fingers. Oh, God. What did you think of that scene?
I mean, I think, I told you right before we started recording that like gloves in this movie and hands are like constant things that we see on the screen. And I think they represent many things. I guess like one of the things the gloves represent was that it kind of represents class, right? Because we see like the lady wearing it and also the uncle wearing it. But we don't really see the Count Fujiwara wearing it. And also like we don't see Suki wearing it because they're considered like a lower class, I guess.
Mm.
There's like that, but then also I think it represents something like I guess it represents intimacy
Mm-hmm.
and like true love, because like we never see Lady Hideko and Suki when they're making love. We never see the gloves, and also like we see Lady Hideko pleasuring herself to fake like an orgasm voice,
Mm-hmm.
and she takes off her glasses and puts it on the side to touch herself as well. So it
You mean
represents
she takes off her gloves, not her glasses?
Yeah, gloves. Sorry. And that represents like pure intimacy, I would say maybe. And when we see Count Fujiwara's fingers slipping away, like cutting, his fingers being chopped, I feel like it also represents that he never had, will never have, also, but also never had in the past that sort of intimacy, because the only love of his was money. I guess, because we actually never see him or say him to Hideko that he loves her. Like he does desire her only like sexually, right? He just wants to take it like forcefully, right. But we never actually like hear him being in love with anybody in the movie.
Right.
And
I do think there's some. Go ahead.
Yeah, it just like represents that his lack of that intimacy, that like true love and lovemaking related to that.
Mm. I do see some symbolism in the gloves as representing like love and stuff like that. I wasn't paying that much attention. I just thought they were like clothes choices. The designer was like, everybody's gonna wear gloves. It's so fancy. You know what I mean? But the only gloves that I remember, the most were Uncle Kazuki's gloves, because they were so black, leather, menacing. They were used to like torture Hideko and her aunt. So those are like the only gloves. So I feel like gloves really also represent power in this movie as well.
Yeah. I mean, also like Hideko was wearing gloves when she was reading as well, and obviously like it's part of protecting the books, I guess, because they're old, but then also I guess it's part of like protecting yourself from the books because they contain such like perverted sort of I don't know, like context.
Yeah.
Content.
Yeah, there's a lot to read into in that.
Yeah.
But while while the Count is being tortured, getting his fingers cut off by the paper slicer, there's a large octopus right there, and
Yeah.
that octopus was apparently the thing that Uncle Kazuki used to terrify everybody. Because what Uncle Kazuki uses to protect himself is knowledge and access to the unknown and the bizarre to keep people away or to keep people in line. And so we finally see that what terrified Hideko the most about Mr. Kazuki was not him himself, but the demon that he kept under the basement, which is metaphorical for like I think a lot of things too here. And while the Count is being tortured, he's smoking his blue cigarettes. We noticed that in the car that took him back to the house, he smoked all of his white cigarettes all together. And I thought, oh, wow, he's going to get executed quickly. So that's why he's just having his last smoke. But he actually was saving the blue cigarettes, which had mercury in them. So while he's being tortured, he's smoking these cigarettes in this room and slowly killing himself, but also killing the guy around him. What did you think of that?
Yeah, like that was like smart of him. I once like kind of appreciated his like smartness in like how you appreciate like con artists and how like they do some things like practically and smartly and stuff like that. And also like I think that was like sort of the ending of the movie, right? And at the same time, like while we see Count Fujiwara like being tortured and stuff like that, we also like the scenes cut back to like Lady Hideko and Suki as well, and they get on this like big boat, right? And they're like now free and stuff like that, and they're giggling. And here comes the like a glove symbol again, because we see that Suki takes off Lady Hideko's gloves and her ring that she was married to Count Fujiwara, and also like her mustache, and then she throws it into the ocean. And again, I guess like we see Suki just kind of like creating this new life for Hideko once again, and also like her getting rid of that like toxic masculinity, and also the class difference between them, because that's one thing that separated them, that Lady Hideko was always wearing gloves and Suki was not, and that was also representation of the class. And yeah, we kind of like see them sort of finally freeing themselves from all the toxic things they had in their lives.
Yep. And that's basically like the end of the movie until we get to the final sex scene. that happens there. And yeah, the final sex scene happens on this boat that's headed to Shanghai, China. And in there, the girls get naked, they start kissing on each other, and they pull out these the metal balls that were used to torture Hideko when she was a child, the same ones that she was smacked over the knuckles with. She now licks them in her mouth, puts them in Suki's mouth. Suki puts them in her mouth. They wet up both of the balls, and then they insert them into each other. And then the final scene we see is this steamboat rolling away, and we hear the sounds of the jingle, 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 jingle of the vaginal balls inside
Wow.
of them. This is I'm describing the story because this
I
is
know.
important. I feel like this is important, right? If we're talking about these liberated lesbians, well, let's talk
Yeah.
about all the sex scenes.
Yeah, no, no, that's fine. Yeah, like here, I just want to go back to the other thing that I was talking about before when, Hideko was reading the story for herself. So someone said in the comments in Letterbox that he actually like hated the ending because he thought it was sort of like cheesy, but then he realized something when he rewatched the movie again. And he realized that in that scene where Hideko is reading the story to the gentleman and the lights go off, and then she starts reading for herself because she's not seeing the faces of, the men in the room. And then when it's finished, we see lights come back on, and yeah, like we see Hideko coming back to reality, into performing. But he says like in the ending we see them like doing this and the lights go off in the boat and they don't come back on, so now it's only for them and for them only, it's not for another audience.
Mm.
And he sort of like made this analysis of that basically.
Okay, I can get that. I can get that. Now their sexuality is in their control. They're in control of their own lives and that sort of stuff. I just feel like the fatal flaw of this movie that is trying to send a message that you know, uh, women shouldn't be sexualized. They should be free, autonomous. That you do the same exact things in this movie that you're criticizing, and it's hard for me to see that ending and say, yeah, that's a victory, because it's almost like as if two slaves ran away from the deep south, and then they make it to Canada, and then while they're freaky in bed, they pull out the whips and chains and start whipping each other and tying each other up and stuff like that, using the same tools that they use to oppress them. I find that if you really want liberation, you have to break not only the chains of mental slavery, but also physical slavery too. So the balls should have been thrown overboard as well. And they could have had, love with, they could have made love without that, in my opinion.
Mm. I mean, I understand your point of view. I do think it's not like that's not what I think about the ending. I guess like you can look at it from both sides, and for me, it was more like owning your trauma, drawing strength from your drama or the things that oppressed you. Because like, out of all the things, that was the only story Hideko liked, and so like he owned that. It's sort of like the same argument that men make, like, oh, like women complain about like being, objectified and being sexually abused and stuff like that, but then they like to get, spanked in the bed or something like that, or they like to get choked in the bed and things like that. But it's like, I can like what I like. It doesn't define me completely, and it doesn't give you the right to do those things to me. This is like my right and basically how I want to do certain things. It doesn't give you the right to like do that sort of abusive behavior without like out of the context that I want. So I thought that was kind of like Hideko owning up to her, her trauma. I don't know.
I feel you. And there's an argument to be said that, oh, black people did the same thing. We took the N word, the most vicious, vile word in the English language, and now we made it cool, fly, and now we own it. And now white people can't say it, right? But I think there's a difference, not in, women wanting to be choked in bed and stuff like that. The thing is that we would want a world where men don't choke and spank and abuse women, right? Outside of the bedroom, right? And those are actions. And I believe that if you have tools and actual things that are used to oppress women, we wouldn't bring that in there. We wouldn't bring that into the bedroom. You don't bring actual things that are used to oppress y'all. Like, for example, it's okay to bring handcuffs and belts and all sorts of ties into the bedroom with your girl, because that's not how we actually dominate over women, right? Patriarchy is not enforced brutally nowadays, right? But if
Mm-hmm.
it actually was, if we were living back in time when, women were tied up and whipped and stuff like that, or burnt at the stake, you wouldn't want those things in the bedroom, right? Do you get what I'm saying? Does that
Yeah,
make
I
sense?
get what you're saying, but I feel like, once you overcome like the psychological borders of that, it's not that really important if you have that thing in the bedroom. That's just like something material for you there to get pleasure from. If you overcome the psychological aspect of it, obviously, like if that's still a thing, if that's something that's still happening, then yeah, like it's not okay to have those things.
Yeah. I mean, I just, I don't know exactly what to say, but I'll just say this. The movie was entertaining in the sense that, it's an interesting story, very great cinematography, great acting.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was some music here and there, cool twist and that sort of stuff. But the
Yeah.
overall message has some very powerful themes, like how colonialism corrupts,
Mm-hmm.
greed can corrupt, that love can conquer all. Those things, those themes are powerful. But
Yeah.
the way it's shot and the way that they tell that story, I feel like reinforces the worst parts of that. They reinforce the worst parts of looking at like women's sexuality in the corn industry, like, and erotica and that sort of stuff. Because all we see is the film actually show erotica to us, and then women embracing, the sort of erotica that kept them oppressed.
Yeah, but I agree with you. Like, yeah, there are some stuff that's happening that's kind of spoiling the true, like, aspirations of the themes. But then also, like, uh, the thing is, like, just because one thing is associated with discrimination, oppression, and all of those things, and I'm talking about like sexism here or objectification of the woman, like, it doesn't mean that that thing is like completely should never be like shown and things like that. And I guess, like, I'll give an example. For example, let's say fried chicken and watermelon. These are racist things, like racist symbols that were opposed on Black people, that they love these foods, right? Mm-hmm. And for example, like, you joke around and say like, I'm never eating fried chicken and things like that, which is understandable, but it doesn't mean fried chicken doesn't taste good. Fried chicken tastes good. I love fried chicken, or watermelon tastes good and it's refreshing and whatnot. So like, just because those things are made symbols doesn't mean they're actually bad. And if they're not actually bad, then you can take them and own it.
But the difference is fried chicken tastes good, but scissoring does not feel good. The only
Yes, it
time
does. You don't know that.
Okay, but I could all right. From what I know, once again, we need some real lesbians in here talking to us. But I do not think scissoring is done anywhere other than just for the entertainment of people who are watching other people have sex, as in
Okay.
usually in the pornography.
We don't have enough information about that because we are not lesbians, one. And then two, like, okay, that's just one scene. Like, we know that people use toys and stuff like that in the bedroom, and most probably the balls might have felt good and stuff like that. So we don't really know that. But once again, I feel like it's more like owning up to certain things when it comes to the themes of sexuality and yeah, like, just that sort of sexual identity and things.
I got you. I just I don't know. I'm just kind of over it now because the more I think about it, the more I just want Mr. Kazuki to rise again.
Wow.
I just want,
we don't need him alive.
But overall, what did you rate this movie?
I mean, the more that we think about it, I do discover like different themes which are very interesting and big. So I'm gonna give it an 8. I'm gonna give it an 8. I gave it 7.5 last night, but now that we think about it, I kind of enjoyed it more than I thought.
I give it a 5 out of 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why 5?
Number one, there were some parts that were extra, like the rewinding of almost the entire movie. That was a bit much. I feel like those dramatic twists between the 3 different parts, or at least between parts 1 and 2, could have been done in a way that made you feel it, as in it's a more dramatic event that occurred on screen. And also, as well, just the themes that were, I feel like, extra. The sex scenes did not have to be that way if we're going to tell this sort of story. If we're telling this sort of story about erotica, about females being abused, about colonialism, about twisting and corrupting the mind, we don't have to have our female protagonists, who we are rooting for, end up doing some of the things or reenacting some of the things that kept them oppressed. But that's why a bit too long. It's just a bit too long.
Yeah, that's part of my like, I guess, cons as well. Like, that rewinding was a bit long, and yeah, there were like some, I guess, maybe loopholes, or not loopholes, but some weird resolutions with themes, I guess, or like questionable. But overall, like, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I think we'll wrap this up. Here. This has been The Handmaiden. Shout out to everybody who is watching these videos on YouTube. Go subscribe. Simon Hill keeps it trail. If you're listening to this on Spotify, shout out to you. Thank you as well. And we'll be back here to do our review of Jungle Fever, I believe, very soon. And shout out to Thomas Anderson, for whoever you are. You're more than welcome. If you've seen this movie, you can give your opinions if you have anything you want to say. I gave you the opportunity to speak earlier, but you didn't say anything. And anybody is welcome to join our chats on here, drop their opinions about the movies. I'll always send the tweets or the links to the movies on Twitter or X a few days before we watch the movie, and you can give your take on it too. So, all right. Well, Tom doesn't want to say anything, but we'll catch y'all later. Peace.